call to order the Planning Commission Working Group on this historic January 20th, 2021. Ms. Cook, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. O'Connor?
Here.
Mr. O'Connor is an at-large member. Ms. Leverins?
Here.
Ms. Leverins is also an at-large member. Mr. Haldeman?
Here.
Mr. Haldeman represents the Berkeley District. Mr. Polster?
Here.
Mr. Polster represents the Jamestown District. Dr. Rose? Ms. Null?
Aye.
Ms. Null represents the Stonehouse District. Mr. Kropp?
Here.
Mr. Kropp represents the Powhatan District and is chair of the Planning Commission. Ms. Wortman?
Here.
Ms. Wortman represents the Community Participation Team, and we have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. And before going on, we need to go through the housekeeping of the virtual resolution that's in your package. And to summarize, on September 8th, 2020, the board readopted the Continuity of Government Ordinance, which under certain circumstances permits this committee to conduct today's meeting by electronic or telephonic means without a quorum of members physically present. May I have a motion for adoption of the resolution for today's meeting?
So moved, Barbara.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. We typically do not have a public comment period. However, the public is provided the opportunity to submit comments either through email, voicemail, or other means. Ms. Cook, have we received any comments from the public?
No, no comments have been received.
Okay, thank you very much. Would you mind introducing staff and consultants?
Certainly, yes, thank you. I am Ellen Cook, Principal Planner, and joining me today from James City County are Paul Holt, Tammy Rosario, Thomas Wysong, Terry Costello, Jose Rivero, Brett Meadows, Tori Haynes, and Alex Berg. We are also pleased to have with us this evening Chris Johnson with the Office of Economic Development and Tony Small with the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division. Also joining us are our partners in this comprehensive plan update, our consultants Vlad Gavrilovic and Todd Gordon from EPRPC and Leanne King from Clarion Associates. Thank you.
Thanks very much. First item of business is the minutes of our November 23rd, 2020 PC Working Group meeting. May I have a motion for approval if there are no edits or comments on that?
Alderman moves approval.
Thank you, Jack. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. The first section of the comp plan materials for this afternoon are the economic development materials. Mr. Wysong?
Good afternoon. I'm Terry Costello, and with me is Thomas Wysong. Together, we will be presenting the revisions to the economic development section of the comp plan. Next slide. The items for review today are revisions to the technical report, an update to the community guidance document, and the public-private partnerships briefing paper, and we will also be reviewing the goals, strategies, and actions. Next slide. Revisions to the technical report include language that references the importance of preserving the county's rural character and historic ambiance, revisions to the commuter information, the addition of NASA Langley Research Center and Thomas Jefferson National Accelerator Facility as examples of military, technical, and research and development establishments, and improvements to the existing language that address the need for diversification and economic resiliency. Next slide. The community guidance document has been updated to reflect the results of the Establishing Our Goals questionnaire. Of the responses received, 88 respondents said the goal should remain the same, with 31 stating it should be changed. Comments mentioned from those who stated the goal should change are noted on the slide shown. They include the Office of Economic Development should more focus on diversifying the tax base by seeking out businesses that offer full-time jobs with higher pay and benefits. The engaged 2045 public input priority should be considered for the new goal. Based on the understanding that tourism is a driving force behind the economy, search for more diverse revenue streams less affected by economic turndown than tourism, and use historical and tourism resources as a strategic asset. The results from the Alternative Future Survey indicated that Scenario B would focus on increasing economic diversity, preference for vibrant mixed uses and walkability, and the need for higher paying jobs. Next slide. With regards to the goals, strategies, and actions, the goal has been revised to reflect citizen input. Revisions have been made to the strategies and actions with input from the Office of Economic Development, and actions have been added to coordinate with a strategic plan. Next slide. The revised economic development goal is to build a more sustainable local economy with a diversity of businesses that attracts higher paying jobs, supports the growth of the county's historic agritourism and ecotourism sectors, contributes positively to the community's quality of life, and upholds James City County's commitment to community character. Next slide. And now we look forward to your questions and comments. I also wanted to mention that we did receive comments back from some of the members of the Planning Commission Working Group, and we will be reviewing them. If anybody would like to discuss any of those comments, we can do it at this time as well.
Thank you very much, Ms. Costello, and I'll turn it to the working group. Just a reminder that the raise your hand icon would be preferable, but any questions or comments for staff? All right. Well, thank you very much for staff, and thanks to
Rich?
Oh, yes.
I have my hand up.
Oh, I didn't see that, Jack. Go ahead.
Sorry.
I did too.
Okay.
Oh.
You go, Julie.
Okay, never mind. My raised hand icon is not working on my screen for whatever
Okay.
reason. So you all will have to jump in as need be.
You go ahead, Julie, and I'll go second.
All right. Well, I cranked out my comments as best I could, but I thought perhaps we should discuss one of my comments, which has to do with whether we should put in an action item to review the experiences over this last year. You know, with luck, those are unprecedented experiences, but we should perhaps learn from them as regards with the pandemic's effect on the economy and how it's affected local businesses. And sometime over the next 5 years would be a really good time to look back on that and not lose the potential for these lessons learned. So just wondering what everybody else thinks about doing something like that.
Would that be a goals strategy action item, Julie?
Yeah, that would be an action item. And I think I also said something about putting it in the technical report, just a mention that the pandemic has had a pretty dramatic effect and will have a dramatic effect on tax revenues. And the county is having to address that.
Okay. Any discussion?
This is Jenny. Those of you who read my comments will know that I agree completely with Julie. And as it stands, I find the technical report way too cheery. There have to be some negative effects on our local economy from the pandemic. And given the timing of when this will come out, I think to have no mention of it whatsoever is just leaves a bad impression. So I I endorse what Julie is saying. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Frank. In one of my earlier comments, I referenced the Weldon Cooper study in the spring, as well as the latest one from the HRPDC. And I think the theme that I've heard in it, I've heard nobody refute it, is that the change in employment and in the economy over the next 5 years, and the measure that everybody is using is the percentage of GDP. And this was local in terms of the Hampton Road area, is that this thing, if we get back to some kind of a normal, is at least 5 years out. And so what's interesting to me is when you look at, I think Jenny said, what is the NACIS, which are the employment categories that are used, is those categories that are going to be affected are in the entertainment, busch garden type thing, and the tourism hotel, as well as the food industry, of which the tax base of this town is very reliant on. And so I agree with both Julie and Jenny that somehow or another, we've got to indicate that over the next 5 years, that we are going to see not only reductions in revenue, but we're going to see those particular things, those sectors of our economy impacted. Now, to what degree, you can take a look at both those reports and they'll tell you what the losses are in terms of the NACIS piece. But the point is that there is going to be that impact. It's what we know right now, and it's not likely to change. And something of that sort should be in there besides just the NAIC thing comment in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? And again, my screen is not showing the hand icon, so you'll just have to jump in as you can. Thank you. All right. Well, it sounds like the consensus of the working group is to include a goal to reassess as the time goes on and see what the economic impacts are. Does staff have any questions on that, or do you need any additional clarification?
Yes. Come back with some language for the group. We could add.
Yeah. I'm sorry. No, my apologies. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we can probably add some language into the technical report and bring it back and maybe come up with a GSA as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
My apologies. To add to that, we did keep those comments in mind and search for some current information that could help give us some more in-depth insights into the effect of the pandemic on the local economy. And I think one of the challenges with that is that the majority of the data that we look at is trend data from the last 5 to 10 years. And so much of that doesn't include the current data because that hasn't been prepared. So I think to build off what Terry was saying, we could add some more language in there that speaks to the pandemic. I do think it's difficult or potentially not possible to find specific data that speaks to the immediate effect, since we still do have stimulus packages that are being passed and distributed. So I did want to say that we did have that comment and look into it. So I think probably addressing those things through language as opposed to hard data is probably the best way we can approach it at this point.
Yeah, this is Julie, and I totally agree with that. It's way too soon to get any hard data. And it's also way too soon to do any serious analysis of it because we're still in the middle of it.
This is Frank again. I think I got the technical report piece and I got what you said, Tom. But the thing that I'm looking for in the GSAs is that we have a set of goals to try to diversify the economy. And we have some laudable strategies. But if you're going to have a downside in these areas of the economy, then it's even more important to emphasize those actions that may expand the economy in different areas besides continue to rely on the entertainment and the hospitality business for the income of it. And so the So the GSAs within the ED section need to be a little bit more pointed and more proactive in looking at some of those alternatives or aspirations and trying to turn them into more tangible things. And so, we need some help from the staff in terms of coalescing some of these things into actionable items, which they're not.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's helpful.
Jack, did you have a comment? Okay. All right, anybody else? All right, for staff, is that pretty much all you need to proceed then?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you, Terry. All right.
This is Frank again, and just to make a point on this, is one of my comments that we had is retaining the business on our solar farms and our CPACE people. And so part of those programs allow industries to do something different with a partnership with the county. And so that's what I mean about something actionable to help the economy with some of these GSAs. And specifically, I was talking about ED 5.5 and ED 8.
Yeah, we do have a copy of that language that you had sent us that's in our notes. And that is a good example of specific pointed language to the strategy to help fulfill it. So that's much appreciated, and it's something we'll definitely take a look at.
Thank you, Tom.
Rich, can I
Yes.
ask a clarifying question?
Sure, Tim, go ahead.
So are we talking two separate ideas here or one? Because one I'm hearing something that talks about, what this past year has brought onto the local economy, and two, Frank's talking about, steering away from hospitality, tourism type pieces. And so it's just a clarification for me. Are we looking at one or two things? Because personally, I think those are two very separate things, because, the hospitality, tourism, Colonial Williamsburg, Busch Gardens, water country type drivers, they could go away. I was a big part of Busch for a number of years, and there was always talk from, that this is a declining destination in the tourism and conference business. So I think that those are two independent things, and just trying to understand what direction we're going on that.
From my perspective, Tim, I'm looking at diversification and not being so dependent upon one piece. And so I'm looking for strategies and actionable things to start moving us in that direction.
And this is Julie.
Right.
I'm looking for something, as you said, that would reflect on, in the technical report, would simply mention that we are now in this pandemic and we will have a lot of reflecting to do, and then translating that into the GSAs with an action item to actually reflect on the data when it becomes available, and then perhaps, to come up with strategies which would include those strategies and actions that Frank has proposed, for making sure that if we ever encounter something as drastic as this again, we perhaps have some tools that we can use to deal with it.
So, okay. I just think, for the clarification, I just think it's important that the two are separated, because the diversification is needed for type reaction. So thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? All right, and thank you, Mr. Johnson, for being available.
Rich, I have some two other comments.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you got to just jump in, because I don't
Okay.
see your hand icon, Jack.
Fair enough. No, I understand. I don't envy your job on the best of times. I have two. Number one is similar to the first subject, and that is there's no data yet because it hasn't happened yet. But I've made this point a couple of times during these discussions, and that is beginning in May, the state of Virginia is going to increase the minimum wage 50%. And by 2024 or 5, I forget which, 100%. And I wrote in my note to everybody a week ago, I think this is a very big deal. There was a study by President Obama, which dates it, proposed the federal minimum wage right now is $7.25 an hour. President Obama proposed a $10.50, something like that. And the Congressional Budget Office did a study that found that roughly 2/3 of the people who earn minimum wage would enjoy the higher minimum wage, and 1/3 would lose their jobs. And they'd simply be laid off by employers who couldn't afford to pay it. And there would be other businesses who would just go out of business because they couldn't afford to hire people at the higher wages and they couldn't run their business. We have a fairly large percentage of low wage people here in James City County. And I don't know, I'm not making any forecasts here because I'm not qualified, but if this thing goes up 50% in May and 100% in a couple of years, retail establishments, hotels, things like Busch Gardens and so forth, this is going to change their whole business model profoundly, I would think, in ways that I'm not qualified to say. But I don't know what to say about this in a comprehensive plan, and I don't know what goals or strategies we should implement to confront it. But some kind of discussion on this, I think, is in order. This plays into affordable housing. It plays into how we, we're talking about scattering a few mixed use or complete communities around, which would include retail establishments. And this subject plays into that. Anyway, as usual, I'm good at identifying problems and not so good about solving them. But that was my point number one. My second point has to do with the goal, which I think is significantly better than the one we have now, but I'm still not completely satisfied. And I made some suggestions in the piece that I sent around a while ago. The Business Climate Task Force report has 5 characteristics of desirable businesses. And we've touched on a few of them here in this new goal, but one that we left out is the word clean. We want clean businesses. That comes from the Business Climate Task Force. We don't mention anything about the fiscal impact. Better balances the tax base is a term that I took from the county's own economic development OED goal, but it's also in the Business Climate Task Force report. In any business that we want in here, we want to contribute to the tax base, I would think. And I included professions and investment opportunities in the type of economic development that we want to attract. So those are my 2 points, and you've heard them both before, I think.
This is Jenny. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Jenny. I'll talk after you.
I was just going to say, I agree with Jack. And on both the minimum wage thing and on the point that he made, or I think it was Jack who made it, about retail and the whole business of the mixed use communities that we're talking about in the scenario B, yet lots of people telling us that we already have too much retail, and there's kind of a disconnect there. With regard to the minimum wage, what about the idea of including a strategy or action that says something about monitoring the implementation of increases in the required increases in the minimum wage and the effects on our service-oriented business in particular, and I don't know, taking steps, I don't know what they would be, but at least acknowledging that it's a thing we're worried about, and that we're going to keep track of. That's pretty weak, but I don't have any better suggestion right at this moment.
Tim, I know you're next, but this is Julie. I wanted to build on what Ginny just said about monitoring trends, because I think there's some other trends that we could also monitor. And one is the effect on retail operations of the trend towards online ordering, because that's going to have a profound effect and may continue to have a profound effect on retail operations as well.
Here, here.
Okay, Tim, you're next.
You know, I know I'm always Jack's contrarian, but
I love you anyways, Tim.
Thanks, Jack. No, actually, it was interesting because it was on the news this morning, and I don't remember what channel I was watching because it was about 4:30. But there's some recent studies where they're comparing county by county, where some counties have increased the minimum wage and others have kept it stagnant. And they did not see noticeable differences in unemployment from county to county by the increased wages. So it was a curiosity, and there was a presentation to the House of Reps last year, about a year ago, by the Economic Policy Institute, and about taking the minimum wage up to $15 by 2024, and there's a whole bunch of other things out there that actually talk about increased employee retention, and so there's a lack of turnover. So it actually is a benefit to employers. And you know, the reality with some of this stuff, you know, if you look at like fast food restaurants, they're not changing their volumes. They're already reducing employment by online ordering, you know, whether it's an app or you go to a McDonald's, you go to a kiosk, you order your own food. So they're already reducing, and the monies are just going into the corporate coffers versus their employees. So, you know, so it's an interesting thing that, you know, what the stuff I've been seeing and reading as of late is that it's not going to have as dire effect on corporations, and in fact, you know, there's probably going to be more cash in the community, which would actually increase consumption, whether it's retail or restaurants or things like that. So, so there's a, you know, clearly Jack and I read different source materials, but you know, I just I'm more concerned. I think Julie raises a good point about what the impacts. What we don't know, and it's not just on retail, is what the impacts of technology are on living, because I think we will see a significant shift in that. You know, I mean, we're already seeing it. My neighbor has Amazon come to their house at least 3 times a day. You know, it's shocking to me. It's just not the world I live in. But you know, we will definitely see those trends changing, you know, we'll see jobs that we never saw before, such as, homes built in clusters and, a porter who's receiving all the packages and the delivery foods and those types of things. So the next 5 to 10 years, I think, will be very interesting from that perspective.
Thank you, Tim.
This is Frank. I wanted to offer 2 comments to Jack's piece. The first one was clean. And one of the things that I think that I've suggested in our public facilities that the county become carbon neutral by 2045 as part of the governance program. And so when I put the 2 suggestions in to retain in ED5 and 8, is the idea on clean is that we have a standard called LEEDs, or the gold star piece. But the example of the LEEDs is that we had a case with that 7-Eleven that wanted an extension on building their food place. They had the gas station in place down by the hospital, the doctor's hospital. And they had done submitted within their package a LEEDs, but the minimum score was 100, and they only scored an 80. And so, we ought to, at least not only for the county facilities, but encourage and incentivize clean industries when they come in there. The second portion of that was a CPACE program that has an ordinance in our code that allows us to do a partnership with retrofitting, not only for solar, but other energy efficient pieces to, once again, get at the clean piece. So those are the reasons why I put those things in. So to reinforce that idea that Jack was talking about, clean. On the other piece that we're talking about is, it seems to me that just like we've said that we don't have the data for the what's going to happen on the coronavirus, is we don't have something that is on an annual basis that does the same thing that the technical report tries to do by telling us what the state of the economy is over the last 5 years. And so there are some indicators within the data that we have that if it was put into a report, you could start to see a trend line of what's happening either in the retail or whatever. So the ones that I'm thinking about is the BPAL, which is the business tax, which you hear is either going up, is going down, it's trending this or not. We now have data coming in for sales tax from the internet that are coming in. And so instead of looking at those things as when our financial officer gets up there to talk about the budget and we go the pluses and minuses of how much money we've got to spend, what we ought to do is be able to take that data on an annual basis and say, what is the state of the economy? And so we have a set of statistics in there that show the top 10 guys that employ there with some number. But the fact of the matter is it's the small businesses that most of the employment it is. And so what's the state of that over the next 5 years? And on an annual basis, can we see a trend line about that data that the county does collect, but it looks at it from budget, not from where the state of the economy is. And the only time we get to see that is here in this technical report, and it's what? Past data. Doesn't tell us in any active way. So that my suggestion to the staff is to maybe look at the data that they put into the technical report and to see if we can get something that starts to give us a trend line on what's happening in the retail, what's happening in the hospitality, what's happening with small businesses, et cetera, so that at least we know what the trend is looking like in more proactive ways.
Frank, that BPOL tax was exactly one of the things I had in mind when I suggested that there might be some data that's readily available. At least you can find out what the tax collections are from the county in a reasonably quick way, I would think. I don't know, maybe, but it would, I endorse your idea completely. Thanks.
Thank you. Any staff comment on those suggestions?
I think all that's extremely helpful, and I've been taking lots of notes. I did want to check in and see, I do think the plan on our end was to possibly go through the GSAs on the screen. And much of what you all have brought up, I think I actually have some good spots where they could go. But if we had time and there's no other questions, perhaps we could transition to the GSA screen and I could just run through a quick summary if that's acceptable to you all.
Sure, why don't we go ahead and do that, Thomas?
Well, as you all have already discussed, we've got that revised goal language, and we did receive some comments from you all about ways to potentially improve that. So did anybody have any further comments on the goal language at this point?
Goal. Build a more clean businesses. Attracting jobs, semicolon. Investment opportunities, semicolon. Investment opportunities is the third addition. Supports the growth of the county's historic agritourism and ecotourism sector. Contributes positively to the community's quality of life, and then better balances the tax base. Better balances the tax base. That's the fiscal element that comes from both the OED and the Climate Task Force report.
Great, and that's the language you had provided us via email, is that correct?
Yes, it is. I just don't know if everybody else agrees with it, that's all.
Gotcha, I'm just checking on my notes is all, thank you.
Okay.
I'm supportive of that. Any comments from the working group?
Well, I am too. This is Julie.
All right. I think we're all in agreement there, Jack. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, and then moving on to the first strategy there. This was reworded to better capture the topics that were listed below. And as you all may remember from the last GSA meeting, I know there's a lot of info here, but the crossed out is the old language, and then the new language is the italicized and shaded gray language. So just for this screen here, rather than me go through each individual one, I can go ahead and ask, I can certainly do that, but I do know we have other sections after this. So I can go ahead and ask for strategy one and for the actions within. Were there any pressing comments or thoughts that the working group wanted to discuss, ways to improve, things like that?
All right. Go ahead, Thomas.
Wonderful. Okay, we scroll on down to the next page. If we could just pause there for a moment, that would be great. I'll ask the same question. We're now on to strategy two, where we had some rewording that talked about exploring opportunities to diversify the economy in order to strengthen the base and do long-term resilience. And I'll ask the same question for strategy number two, if there are any additional comments or thoughts on ways to improve this. And I do have the notes from the discussion you all just had written down here. But wanted to ask again and see if there were any thoughts.
Hey, Tom, this is Frank. I don't want to waste time with repeating the stuff that I've already given you. Is that okay?
Yes, that works for me. We've got it written down. So at this point, if we wanted to just focus on any new thoughts, we can do it that way. But I wanted to give everyone a chance just in case.
Thomas, this is Rob. I might suggest that under 2.2.2, you add green energy, because that's certainly a new area of technology that could be of interest, especially in a partnership.
Gotcha.
Good catch. Thank you, Rob.
This is Jenny. A question also about 2.2. I was not, until I became part of the TCWG, familiar with the Greater Williamsburg Target Sector Analysis, which is now, 5 or 6 years old? And I wondered if those recommendations, if anybody has asked whether the recommendations from that analysis need to be refreshed in light of changes in circumstances. And so I guess the question is, if you ground a recommendation in that sector analysis without any review of its currentness, is that a good thing?
I think we need to hear from Mr. Johnson, because if I understand it correctly, they're getting ready to do a new study here in the next year, and it's already funded. Am I incorrect about that, sir?
That's correct, Mr. Haldeman. The study is already being done. It's already in review by the GWP partner localities at the moment. So to your previous point, to ground something on something that's 5 years old, we'd end up right back where we were with the BCTF done more than a dozen years ago. But this document is meant to be updated periodically, and that is being done currently. So anything that would be reflected in this plan would certainly be on the updated study, not the one from 2016.
Can you share any of that with us?
In its draft form, it's not going to change any of the 5 target sectors, and certainly the 3 principal ones that we are targeting the efforts in this office. With advanced materials, components, food and beverage, and professional and technical services being the 3 that guide much of what we do. Tourism and defense being the legacy business sectors. There's no material change. It just modernizes and takes current analysis to be able to reinforce what we're doing and target the efforts that this office and the other OED offices in the locality do.
Just as a follow-on, is there something that we can do to sharpen an action within this comp plan that would complement that update?
I think the draft language that we've worked with staff on presenting in 2.2 is reflective of that study. I don't think any additional actions need to be done to bore that down any further, because that will be going to the Economic Development Authority for implementation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do think it would be useful, however, to make sure that the technical chapter text reflects the fact that the study is or has been, by the time this is done, updated. And if you can share the points similar to those that you just made about no major changes, that would help to give the reader a sense that this is not something that's just out of date. Thank you.
Can I ask a question on 2.2.2? You know, it's where we explore partnerships with William & Mary and other entities. You know, I don't want to pick on William & Mary per se, but, you know, if it's physics, William & Mary's going to Jefferson Labs. You know, there was talk about them partnering with EVMS, which was in Norfolk. You know, and I'm watching the expansion of VCU. You know, for those who don't go down 60, you know, they're now in Providence Forge with an emergency facility. So, you know, so it's a 2-pronged comment. You know, one, do we want to identify other entities to expand it a little bit? And 2, you know, do we want to talk about not just higher education, but we've talked a little bit before about how, you know, the what's the word I'm looking for? You know, New Horizons and those types of pieces are really important to the recruitment piece, to have a you know, the schools like to call it a 21st century workforce. But when we're sending those kids to Newport News and Hampton to get educated, to me, that's not making it as attractive for the folks here. So I'm not sure what the right answer is, but you know, I think there's a lot. You know, I don't know if you all had a chance. And I know it was a long thing to watch, but it was very interesting to me when I was in the Kornblau real estate program last week. You know, they were talking about the site selection process and how much faster and more robust it is. But there's a number of companies who are just following Amazon. So if Amazon picks a site, that meets their qualifications. They're not even, they're just going to find a site and build. They're not even doing a lot of due diligence on the locality. So, that's something for Mr. Johnson to do, is to get Amazon here. But, if he'd do that, everybody'd be happy, right?
Anybody else? Okay, Thomas, I guess you could proceed.
Great. And I did want to build off of Mr. O'Connor's point and point out that I believe it's 3.2. There is that reference to New Horizons, and we did include some language based on a comment that he had made about trying to locate more of those opportunities within the county. So I think maybe that does address some of what you were saying, for sure. But I will ask, does anybody have any questions or thoughts on strategy number 3?
No, I appreciate it. I just, I just was trying to figure out if there's a way to do it to make it in the economic development portion of, using it to be attractive to businesses, not just to locate it here, but to have the workforce, to have the training here, so it becomes an attractive place for businesses to locate for just because it would be more robust education opportunities.
Oh, I see. Thanks for the clarification.
Anybody else?
All right. Well, if not, we can keep scrolling down to strategy number 4. Which is on the next page, I believe. We can pause it there. And much of this language was existing language that just got reorganized. And the new language is in gray and italicized. So I'll stop there and ask if folks had any particular thoughts or questions about this strategy.
This is Jenny. On 4.2, it wasn't terribly clear to me what it added beyond the main goal.
Well, I believe that because 4.2 references the primary service area, it's specifying where that new development and redevelopment is best suited for. I think that's sort of implied by strategy number 4, but it gets specific in 4.2.
Okay.
Other comments for strategy 4? No. Okay, Thomas.
Yeah, but hold on, this is Frank. I'm trying to go back and forth between what was 5 and now what's the new 4. So are we on the new 4, Tom?
Yes, sir, we are.
Okay. On 4.3 and 4.4, if you all hadn't read my notes, we have in the land use piece that we've been talking about is a vision for those mixed use areas. And the one for 4.3 and for 4.4 talks about the interchange, 64 Croker Road interchange. And the one portion talks about a master plan, and the other one is kind of a sub-area master plan. And I think that language needs to be coordinated with the land use vision piece, and of course the guidance that we put into those EO areas that we're at that are similar to the Barnesville and to the Taylor Farm, the Anderson Corner. So I'm looking for something a little bit more in there that tells me what a sub-area master plan is. And oh, by the way, Mr. Johnson, did you do some work with the Barnesville, with the Hazelwood folks and putting a master plan together with them or consulting with them?
No, sir, that's a private development that the county has no public, no portion of that project is currently public. So that's, the plans that have been put forward for development plans for rezoning applications, we had no involvement with.
So I'm trying to understand then what role you would have played underneath ED 44 with a master plan for Barnesville interchange. I mean, the Hazelwood piece is exactly that. I mean, when I saw that as a DRC, what I was impressed with is that the governor has a program that it supports projects if you can meet its 5 points. And at the time, they were at 3.5, and what they needed was infrastructure for sewer. And they're having a problem on trying to lift it across as opposed to bringing it up from Stonehouse. So why isn't it from a project partnership or a master planning that the ED guys wouldn't be involved in something like that, as well as the Croker?
I don't know what to tell you, Mr. Polster, in terms of why economic development with the resources we have, there's only so many areas we're going to be headed, but we're not driving the effort to lead a master plan to extend sewer to facilitate private development. If they had reached out to our office and asked our input, we would have provided that, but that's not a lead role that we are taking.
So why did you ever have the language in 4.4 for Barnesville interchange then?
Well, I will. The development of that plan 5 years ago, to think that any of those goal strategies or actions came directly out of this office would not be correct. I mean, that is participation in, but to think that this office is actively facilitating the development of sub-area master plans is not correct.
Then why do we have it in the language?
Frank, is what you're talking about, what you've talked about in previous land use discussions of coming up with a concept of what we ideally would like these intersections to look like.
Exactly, and specifically for the ED with the trade zone 20, the Hankins property is the only one that's in that, that's already part of that. And so if we're going to do economic development and we have something in the foreign trade zone problem and it's in the Croker interchange, we have a reason, and the ED has a reason to be participating in that discussion.
But I agree that we shouldn't use the word master plan, but
right,
a concept, perhaps.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out what it meant, and I finally found out. It didn't mean anything.
Well, I think there's a difference between, Frank, getting involved in helping develop master plans and being a resource for private development. That's what I'm hearing is the distinction coming from Chris Johnson's area.
I agree, but the language is there. I didn't put it in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so either it comes out or we figure out another way to do diversity of business in those interchanges. And you know, the Barnesville one is an EO area for economic development.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm lost. I mean, I got the staffing piece, but that's not my issue. That's a resourcing issue for the county. So we're trying to put actions in here so that the staff can take it to the public and get the resources to do it with the board. I mean, that's what it's about.
If I could jump in, I think a potential option, it is true that in the land use section, I think the consultants are looking at those designations and doing some analysis. So a potential thought could be either considering coordinating this GSA better with the land use section or appropriating it to the land use section where those community design guidelines are being worked on to begin with. It might be a better fit potentially based on some of the input here today so that it's clearer who's facilitating it, so that there's not that expectation being put on a department that is a great resource, but isn't at this point expected to be leading that charge. Because for Hazelwood, that is a private development that's being reviewed by the county currently, and there's not the expectation, I think, at this point, at least in terms of current planning, that OED would be participating in that review or leading it, at least from the current planning perspective. So
I'm in agreement with you. I agree. But I also know that if in a previous comp plan in the land use, you wouldn't have put the language in for the Barnesville EO, you wouldn't be able to do what you're trying to do right now with the rezoning application. So that's why I'm looking for that kind of a language in the Croker area so that we have a firm vision. So I agree with you. Move it to the land use, take it out.
Yeah, I thought that was a better fit as well, because right now, the way it's worded, it does put the onus on economic development, but I do think it Thomas's suggestion of moving into land use is more appropriate.
Moving along, I would like to see us retain 5.5 for the reasons that I gave before.
Yeah, and I read your piece on that, Frank, and I agree with you as well to retain 5.5. Any discussion or comments? Okay, Thomas, back to you.
Great. So moving on to strategy 5. This used to be strategy 7, and hopefully this wasn't too confusing to read. I know there's a lot of information here. But there's a few minor revisions to that strategy that talked about context. And then you'll see that 7.1 is the one that was moved up that we just discussed. And then there were some other minor revisions made. So were there any questions or thoughts on strategy number 5?
It doesn't sound like there are. Nope. Go ahead, Thomas.
All right. Great. Moving on to strategy number 6. Pretty similar to strategy number 5, a few minor revisions that were made just for clarity, updating the name of different trade alliances to be more accurate, but pretty small changes overall.
Any discussion? Okay.
Great. Moving on to strategy number 7, which I believe is on the next page. You'll see that was crossed out and some of that was redistributed is the word I'm trying to say. And Alex, if you wouldn't mind, keep scrolling here. It's all the way at the end. This was sort of the landing spot for the language we had about making sure that our current regulations aren't unnecessarily impeding economic development. And so this was just sort of reorganizing those strategies and actions which had been throughout the GSAs into one spot. So I'll stop there and see if anybody had any thoughts on strategy number 7 before moving on to the last one.
It does not look like there's any dissent on that, Thomas.
Great. And then strategy number 8, when you all were having that great discussion during the PowerPoint slide, I thought this might actually be a good landing spot for some of that discussion about the minimum wage and these larger economic trends. As of right now, the language is fairly general to capture that broad discussion, but I wanted to check in and see if the working group would be interested in this being explored as an area to put some of that more specific language about minimum wage and other things.
Yes, this is Julie. That's exactly where I was thinking we could put some action items having to do with the lessons learned from the pandemic and looking at the minimum wage and technology trends.
I agree. I got the impression from the comments from the various members that they would be supportive of that as well. Let me know if anyone doesn't agree with that, but I think that probably would be a good next step for staff on this section.
Great. And that's, unless Terry, you have something else to add, I think we've got.
Tom, I've got one on 8.6 that I want to make sure that the rest of the group understands what I'm talking about there, is that I wanted to see a potential change to the language for that, so that what we could do underneath 8.6 is promote the potential for solar farms in the rural areas. And underneath the Industrial Development Authority under Code 15.2.4901, that ends up in the economic development piece. And so what that means is that the state law allows that to happen. And what it does is it allows the economic development people to be able to bundle credits for carbon sequestration. And so instead of having an individual person come in, you need to bundle it in about a $5 million type of a package for it. So in my mind, that fits what 8.6 is supposed to do in terms of helping the rural community or any of the people. But this is a very active, actionable piece for it. It will require a change in an ordinance, but it is part of this piece of trying to do something to protect the rural areas, as well as it ends up at about $160 an acre additional income to that person who participates in this carbon sequestration piece. So you have my language for that, but that's what I had in mind about inserting it in there.
And I'm supportive of it from previous discussions on the carbon sequestration issue as well. I think that's a good initiative that Frank brought forward. Any discussion? Any comments?
I agree.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you. Thomas, any closing remarks, or Mr. Johnson, any closing remarks?
Nothing for me. Thanks for a great discussion, and thanks to Mr. Johnson for helping us out here. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Next, we move into the public facilities materials, and I have Terry Costello again and Jose Ribeiro. Ellen, I didn't know if you wanted to introduce anything or just go ahead and dive into this.
Just go ahead and dive in, I think. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon and diving in. Thank you all for being here. My name is Jose Ribeiro, and with me today is Terry Costello, and together we'll be presenting the revisions to the public facilities section of the comp plan. Next slide, please. So items for review today include revisions to the technical report and community guidance document, and a review of the goals, strategies, and actions. Next slide, please. Revisions to the technical report include adding language to focus development of public facilities and services to within the PFA, and moving the information from the water source briefing document into the technical report. Next slide, please. Community guidance. Respondents to the Establishing Our Goals questionnaire were asked to review the 2035 Public Facilities Goal. Of 120 responses received, a little over 80% said that the goal should remain the same, and just under 12.5% said it should be changed. Additional comments were provided by respondents who indicated that the goal should be changed. The goal should focus on addressing the water supply, solar power initiatives, and the need to include school needs as an important component of the comprehensive plan. The goal should provide more specificity to clarify the intent of the goal. Funding for public facilities should be reduced or replaced by services provided by private business. The results from the Alternative Future Survey indicated that scenario B would improve accessibility trails, parks, and schools. Next slide, please. Goals, strategies, and actions. So the goal has been revised to reflect the importance of citizen input. Revisions have been made to the strategies and actions with input from the Department of General Services and also the James City Service Authority. Actions have been added to coordinate with the strategic plan. Next slide, please. And this is the revised public facilities goal. Commit to and provide a high level and quality of public facilities, including schools and public services, in a manner that balances the demand for facilities and services and fiscal impact. Next slide, please. And now we're going to go ahead and move forward with the revisions to the goals, strategies, and actions with Terry Costello.
Hello again. As Jose just read, the revised goal is on your screen. Did we have any comments or suggestions?
Barry, this is Frank Holster. I want to talk about 1.9, and then in the chapter itself, underneath facility service standards category, when we talk about education facilities and service standards for public schools. My comment to you before that I put in writing was that you've got an old future thing from 219 when we have a 220. And so I think we ought to be using that as opposed to old data. But the piece that catches me is that in neither one of the 219 or the 220 future think do they talk about pre-K. The pre-K number that you have there came out of a briefing of the board and the school board and the board of supervisors last year, but was never anything official. The thing that bothers me about this is 1.9 talks about encouraging provision and location of preschool programs, but yet, as I recall, from the school people, that they had a waiting list of 154, but they've capped it. And so I don't see how that jibes up with providing that for 1.9. So I don't understand why there's a cap and why we don't know what the real pre-K population is.
Okay. So are you looking for information as to the numbers out there in the other facilities?
I want to fix the school chart that you've got there on page 5.4. First off, it's based on old data. And there's nothing in the future think that talks about what their pre-K enrollment is or what their future needs are. But yet they've briefed the board to say they've capped it, but they had a waiting list of 154. So how is it that we're got an action here that we're going to provide pre-K when we can't even get the data straight?
Okay, I can look into that.
And this chapter will be coming back to us with for another look-see before anything gets finalized as well. Isn't that correct, Terry?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I think as far as the future think, when we started writing this chapter, the October 2020 wasn't available. I mean, it wasn't available, but I can go back and try to update all those numbers with the most current report.
Okay.
The important piece is the pre-K.
Okay.
I mean, there ought to be a substantive document to point to where the numbers are and where the backlog is. And that ought to be right up front.
Okay, good. Thanks, Frank. Any other comments from the working group?
I have one, please, on 112. I sent this in earlier, but Jose mentioned earlier about not citing public facilities in the rural lands or outside the PSA. I think this would be a really good place to state that, just as a second sentence, avoid citing public facilities outside the PSA.
Okay.
Or words to that effect. Thank you, Jack.
Okay.
The group in agreement with that suggestion? I think that's a good idea. Of course, I'm playing the devil's advocate. If a proposed site is out there that's not in the PSA and the board extends the PSA to encompass that site, then that sort of makes that point sort of moot in a sense. Do you
Well, let's
agree?
say rural lands then. Let's just say avoid citing public facilities in the rural lands.
Okay. From the staff standpoint, is there any preference as far as clarity? And I'm fine with either one. I was just, like I said, playing devil's advocate on that.
Well, that's just what happened, of course, with Hornsby and Blake.
Exactly. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, good catch.
Yeah.
Okay, we can look at that.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, go ahead, Terry, continue.
So for strategy number 2, we deleted a couple actions and we also added one action. Oh, I'm sorry, we added more than one action. I was flipping the wrong page. We added a few actions and then we relocated one. Are there any comments on those?
Anyone?
Awesome.
Okay.
For strategy number 3, we reworded the strategy and then added some new actions to it. Any comments, suggestions? Okay.
Okay, that looks good. Thank you.
And then strategy 4, we added some comments in there as well, or added some actions in there. And I just want to mention too, we did get some comments from some of the members already, and we'll look at those as they apply to the GSAs, because I have made note of those as well.
Okay. Terry, I'm sorry, could you go back to 3, please? I skipped something in my notes. In 3.2, under adequate public facilities, schools, could we make some reference to cumulative impact in that?
Okay.
There is somewhere in here some reference to using cumulative impact on assessing adequate public facilities, but it'd be nice for schools in particular. I'm sorry I missed that when we went through the first time.
Good catch. Good catch, Jack. Okay. Go ahead, Terry.
Okay, back to 4. I don't think there were any comments, but I can ask again. Any comments on number 4?
This is Jenny. I'm sorry. I'm going to go back also, building on the comment that Jack just made. Perhaps I missed it, but I did not see any reference in the chapter text to the adequate public schools facilities test policy. And it's odd to me to have goals and strategies that aren't referenced someplace before. So as I say, maybe I missed it. I'm sorry if I did, but if I didn't, maybe you could find a way to work it into the chapter text.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, we can move on to 5.
And then 5, we added one action to the end. Any comments on this one?
No, seems straightforward. Good.
Awesome.
And that wraps up the public facilities materials. Terry and Jose?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for your comments and suggestions.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we move on to the environmental chapter material. That would be Brett Meadows and Tori Haynes. And I'm getting an echo.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Brett Meadows, and with me today from the Planning Department is Tori Haynes. We will be presenting the revisions to the environment section of the comp plan. Also joining us on the call is Tony Small, Director of the Stormwater Division. Items for review today include revisions to the technical report and community guidance document and a review of the goals, strategies, and actions. Next slide. Revisions to the technical report include the addition of an ecosystem services subsection to the farmland, forest land, and ecosystem section, the addition of references to participation-based flooding due to climate change in the flooding and climate change sections, and the addition of a paragraph in the shoreline erosion section to note that the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division is evaluating the Colonial Soil and Water Conservation District's Shoreline Evaluation Pilot Program as a new initiative. Next slide, please. Community guidance received. Respondents to the Exploring Our Alternative Futures questionnaire and goals questionnaire were asked to review the 2035 environmental goal. Of 134 responses received, 76% said the goal should remain the same, and just under 21% said it should be changed. Additional comments provided by respondents who indicated that the goal should be changed reference protecting and promoting resilience to mitigate flooding effects of sea level rise, protect sensitive land and waterways, protect counties' water supply, increase physical connections to nature, limit development in order to protect lands and waterways. The scenario testing results showed that the pattern of land use and growth achieved in scenario B allowed for better environmental impacts over scenario A, including less total impervious land area and less developed land in proximity to environmentally sensitive areas in the county. Next slide, please. Goal, strategies, and actions. Revisions have been made to the strategies and actions with input from the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division and from General Services. Actions have been added to coordinate with the strategic plan. Next slide, please. The environmental goal has been revised and is now continue to improve the high level of environmental quality in James City County and protect rural and sensitive lands and waterways that support the resiliency of our natural system for the benefit of current and future generations. And now we'll move on to the goals, strategies, and actions.
I had a comment on the technical report. Is this a right time to do that? I picked up Rich's echo, I guess. But
echo, yeah, there must be just a bad connection. Now mine disappeared, so you did. Oh no, it didn't. Go ahead, Jack. We'll just make do.
If you're not muted, you get an echo.
Okay.
Well, I've been unmuted all meeting, so.
There, that's better. I don't get yours now, Rich. Nor
yeah, you sound better as well, Jack. Go ahead.
On the tech report, page 2, paragraph 5. The sentence reads, education and regulation are the two primary methods of protecting soils and other natural resources. I suggest changing that to say education, comma, regulation, comma, and sound land use policy are the three primary methods of protecting soils and other natural resources.
I totally support that. Thanks,
Yeah, I
Jack.
agree. That's very good.
I had a couple of cosmetic issues too, but I submitted them. I assume the staff will pick those up.
And my changes were way more than cosmetic, and I apologize in advance for that. But I saw a fair amount of duplication, and I tried to ameliorate some of that.
And I assume staff's reviewing that and incorporating that the editorial changes as necessary.
You and Ginny are invaluable in this, I think. Not just today, but throughout this whole process. You have a real eye for this. And
well, I thank Ginny for getting started, so I don't have to start with a blank slate. So thank you, Ginny.
You're welcome. And if I can just chime in a general comment that I keep coming across language that says implementation of X kind of policy can somehow make things better, which as a reader leaves me thinking, okay, are you going to do it? So I would encourage, wherever possible, use of less passive voice, more active voice. James City County is doing A, B, and C because it makes life better. And really, this goes back to my comment earlier about making certain or doing a more tying of the status of things to the goals, so that when the reader gets finished reading the technical report, there's a basis there for looking at the goals, strategies, and actions. You kind of know where they came from. So thanks for putting up with my detailed comments.
Well, and Ginny, your comments about that, I agree. It could be a very significant major rewrite at this point, but I would hope that the staff could take a look at that and see if there are any reasonably efficient ways to accomplish that, because it really does. It makes a lot of sense.
Thanks.
This is Frank on the technical report on E5, which is the ecosystem in the forest and all the rest of it. Both Ginny and Julie had a comment about who said and what makes them so smart about the DCR piece, and what did they use for a standard to determine those things. And in the submission on my comments to that section in there is I actually sent in the DCR's mapping for both the agricultural, forestry, and the ecosystem pieces with the language that they use that describes how they came to those conclusions for it. Some of it's based on soil, some of it's based on actual people going out and taking a look at it and looking at the connectivity, et cetera, et cetera. And so to that last point is when we do get to the goals, standards, and actions, we should be able to say, okay, what is it for forestry land that you want to preserve and protect? And who says that that's important to us? And it's, once again, back to the governor's program that's alluded to in that section for it, so that there's a connection between the GSA and the technical report, just as the two of them had just said. Thank you.
Anyone else on a technical report? And if not, we'll move into the GSAs. Okay, go ahead, Brett. Any questions or comments on strategy 1? Brett, you're muted, I think.
This is Rob. I apologize if this comment's coming in a little late, but I'm looking at 1.2.5 environmentally sensitive lands. It might be worth referencing the Virginia's Conserve Virginia program, because they've gone through the process of trying to identify important areas for conservation. And that could be brought into these strategies, basically by looking at those lands to see if there's any overlap between what James City County wants to do and what the state of Virginia is looking for.
Rob, that was exactly my point of including those maps that I sent to staff. And what I did is took the outline of James City County for exactly that one, and it shows which ones are very outstanding, and they're all in the rural area. So not surprising. And so that gets to the strategy that we're going to see from Tammy at some point that says, what is it that we want to protect? And by tying those actions to those maps in the technical report, it's easy for somebody to say, oh, there it is. Maybe we should do something about the lower Chickahominy. Ecotourism, which is the other connection to it.
Good. And staff, you got both of those from Dr. Rose and Mr. Polster to roll into the GSAs in the technical report?
Yes.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Brett, are you on mute? I'd be happy to continue going through them if there's any technical difficulties.
It looks like he is still muted, Ellen. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully he'll be able to join us again here in just a second. But in the meantime, if you could scroll down to strategy 2. And I do see a chat from him there saying he has some issues with the audio. So hopefully he'll resolve that momentarily. Okay. So for strategy 2, some slight modification to the language itself, and then a number of changes throughout the actions there, just updating in coordination with our partner agencies, the stormwater folks, and general services. So are there any questions or comments on strategy 2?
Oh, looks like we're good. Good. Thanks, Ellen.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so moving on to strategy 3. Again, kind of a similar set of things, just a number of updates to, make sure it's reflecting current practices and programs. We did add in action 3.8 and its sub-actions per the great comments that you've provided in the past. And at this time, I'll just check and see if there's any comments or questions about strategy 3.
Ellen, this is Frank. I don't think I would have caught the 1.2.5 without Rob saying it, but if you look at 1.2.5 and you look at 3.1 and 3, what's the difference?
Are you saying there's maybe some overlap there where there could be some consolidation? Is that
in the 1.2.5 for sure?
Okay, be glad to relook at that.
Any other feedback? Okay.
Yeah, there was an email that I sent to Ellen because I'm really kind of waiting for a comment, but this notion of open space, green space, PSA, and all the rest of it, and it's going to get to Tammy's paper, is I don't think we have a common lexicon to talk about open space planning, which from the Parks and Rec point of view really includes all of these things. And so there is this not overlap, but there is this supporting piece between the Parks and Recs, the land use, and the environmental section in terms of this notion of open space planning and all of these things like bicycle pathways, green space, open space, et cetera, for it. So somewhere or another, I think there needs to be some language that says if you're going to protect and preserve the character of the county and the rural and retain the rural areas, you got to have a common lexicon about what those strategies are between these different sections.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, well, we can take a look at that, and I'll refer back to what you had sent earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Anyone else?
Certainly.
Okay, go ahead, Ellen.
All right, if we could continue to strategy 4 then.
Does look like Rob has his hand up.
Oh, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, that's it. Rob, you may have missed me earlier saying that the my screen doesn't show that. So just if you have a comment, just jump in when there's a pause.
Yes, of course.
Okay, I believe I got a message that Brett is back with us, but Brett, is that correct? Are you available at this point?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So if you'd like to pick up with strategy 4 there, I think that's where we are.
Okay. Any questions, concerns, or comments about strategy 4?
I have one on 4.3, if I may. In fact, it's more than that. It's every time I run into density bonus and the things we give density bonus for. Of course, LEAD program is one of them, or Earthcraft. In this case, it's for alternative transportation. Affordable housing is another one. I wonder if the county has ever studied the trade-off between the impact of more houses for the density bonus and the benefits of whatever it is we're trading them for, whether it's the LEAD Earthcraft thing or transportation or whatever. In other words, if let's say the normal density is 1 home per acre, but we'll give up to 4 homes per acre if the developer does this or that, which has the greater impact? 1 home, let's take LEED or Earthcraft building, green building standards. And let's say you have 1 home that's built without those standards, just a normal home, or we give a density bonus of 4. So now you have 4 homes that are built with green standards. Which of those 2 sucks up more energy or gives off more pollution? The 4 homes with the green building standards or the 1 home without? And I wonder if anybody's ever looked into that. Same with transportation. I mean, would 1 home removed from any kind of alternative transportation create more or less traffic congestion and air pollution than 4 homes right on a water stop or bicycle paths or what have you? Which of those 2 create the bigger impact? I don't know the answer to that. It's just a question, but I found myself wondering that on more than one occasion as I was reading through the various chapters here.
And of course, it's interesting, Jack, because you almost have to look at as you were pointing out, the items that the bonuses are being given for. For example, if a developer increases the number of affordable housing units in order to get a density bonus, that directly ties into a major shortfall in the county, the affordable housing aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas adding LEED, say LEED building standards, does that have, what has more of an impact? And I see what you're getting at, and it's an interesting question. You almost have to look bonus by bonus as to, well, is this developer offer more valuable to the county or less valuable to the county? And then it becomes almost an exercise in trying to balance which, and this was your point, I'm just sort of agreeing with you, that which has the most benefit to the county and which ends up being detrimental in the sense that you're getting density and not as much of an offshoot. And yeah, it's an interesting dilemma.
And should we resolve that question before we include it in the comprehensive plan? Affordable housing. Yeah, affordable housing is unquestionably a major goal of the county, and we know it costs to include affordable housing, and there's a cost to it, and we've accepted it because it's a goal, and but now you have a home that consumes energy. Let's say all homes consume a certain amount of energy, some more than others. And there are ways to use advanced building technology to reduce energy consumption. I don't pretend to understand them, but I'm sure that's the case. But again, are they so good? Is the technology so good that having 4 homes would consume less energy than one conventionally built home? And have any studies been done on that? And if they don't, then we shouldn't offer them as bonus.
And of course, bonuses. This, to push back a little bit, I think the comp plan being a 20-year document, when we're writing the goal strategies and actions, have to look at the policies that are in place right now that the board has established, and I would argue against trying to resolve that issue before moving forward with that particular goal wording. I would say that if down the road density bonuses for certain items are eliminated, it still doesn't lessen the impact of the goal. It's just saying use the available tools. It's coming across to me that we're trying to maybe address issues that the board needs to take on as this moves forward, and we're just making goals, strategies, and actions based on the tools available right now.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking as we go through this, because I don't have clear answers to this as usual, but should we have a goal or a strategy to assess the impact of LEED, green building technology, as compared to, to conventional building techniques? Because if we're giving more density bonus, then we're getting benefit in whatever category we're talking about, whether it's energy consumption or pollution or transportation or whatever it is. We know that's not the case with affordable housing, and we've accepted it, so that's fine. But I don't know whether we are or not when it comes to energy consumption and pollution and transportation or whatever else we give density bonuses for. So, and it doesn't sound like anybody else does either. So
yeah, this is
maybe we should.
I've got a little bit of a different approach to this thing, which is why I wanted the public facility section to say that we get to a zero carbon point. And I knew that was probably in 2045. I knew that was probably possible because we're the ones that control how it gets built. And so and if you take a look at some of the stuff that was in the public facility stuff that Grace Boone put in there, I mean, they've got things in there for recycling, they've got things for watering, but what they don't have in there are things like, hey, let's move to solar. let's put solar panels on all of our schools as opposed to and decrease the footprint, the carbon footprint for it. So I think there are some things in terms of that green piece. That's the other reason why I was pushing in the economic development as well as in the public facility pieces of the LEED standard, having a standard, meeting a standard. So just because you participate in the LEED program, but you didn't meet the minimum score of 100, let alone went beyond there. So if you're going to incentivize somebody for using the LEED, at least require them to meet a standard. And if they exceed that standard, and there are brackets that the LEED program has, then maybe you'd want to reward that for it in some kind of a bonus or some kind of incentive. So for example, commercial properties, which is why I was trying to get at the CPACE program, that we could incentivize to have the retrofitting of more energy efficient public facilities. So when we start trying to figure out for affordable housing and start converting some of these motels, and somebody from the commercial side comes in, we want to incentivize them to do that by doing something energy sufficient and having a program within the county. So I think that if we're going to have something in here for LEED and you want a green program, you have to have something enforceable, which is why I would have put at least a minimum of 100. Now,
but that doesn't do you any good, Frank. If it doesn't do you any good, Frank, if you don't know, let's say you put a LEED 100 in, it still doesn't answer the question. Does 4 of those houses consume more?
I'm not trying to answer that, Jack. I'm looking at what's going forward in the future and what I can impact, not what's done, because I certainly can't go back and look at all the households that were built and say, you now have to be energy efficient.
Oh, I wasn't suggesting that.
And so the other aspect is that both the state and the federal have standards for energy efficient buildings, which is why we have a reduction in water of 14% because of that policy, which is another energy efficient piece. We have the same thing for window systems and double panes, things like that. So I can't solve world peace and hunger, but I can do something about something specific. So when it comes to the earthcraft, there's no reason why you couldn't put an exception to policy that says, okay, we're only going to apply that bonus, density bonus, to affordable housing if we ever get an affordable housing policy again, which we could enforce and provide an incentive to. So that's a different way of looking at these things.
Mr. Haldeman, if I could offer, as you probably already would have guessed, the county has not in the past done a specific study on that issue. There may be academic sources or something through our American Planning Association resources that might get to some of that, and staff could take a look. We certainly understand the point you're making about that, and staff would be glad to relook at the language of 4.3 and see if we could come up with any suggestions if that suited the working group.
Fine by me. Thank you.
I think that's a good step forward, Ellen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just have one comment. If we're talking about increasing density inside the PSA, and we're talking about these, I think Vlad calls them complete communities. So if we're talking about having the live, work, play type campus, so the increased density would have other impacts just beyond energy consumption by being a walkable community and eliminating some of those 10 traffics per day. So, I understand it's largely an academic exercise, but, I do think that there's reasons to create incentives, especially given where we're trying to go and what we're hearing from the folks that they are okay with higher density inside the PSA. So if that is a consideration, why wouldn't we want to promote, LEEDs or earthcraft buildings? We've got a new community in town, that just won last year a big award from the Department of Energy because of the way it's constructed, and we should really be looking at those types of construction pieces for incentives as well, as opposed to, we talked about water conservation and, it says, oh, no irrigation. I mean, that's just pretty perfunctory and I don't think it gains us much of anything. So, I'm not opposed to maintaining it in order to promote, what we're hearing from the citizens.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. And for the group as a whole, I should have pointed this out when we did the introduction here a minute ago. 4.4 hopefully kind of goes along with what you were saying, Mr. O'Connor, about re-examining our regulations and our policies and incentives related to green building and some of those programs that you all have been mentioning. At the moment, we have currently adopted what are some incentives and then some density bonuses, but that 4.4 would set the stage potentially for revisiting and updating what we have on the books right now.
Good. Thank you, Ellen, for that clarification. I guess proceed. We can go to if there's no further discussion on goal 4, we can move on.
That's the last goal.
Yep. Any additional comments from staff on that one? Okay. No. Thank you all very much. And I think there's been some good direction given, some good questions asked, and we'll be seeing these materials again from staff during the next stage. At this point, other items for discussion. I know Ms. Rosario wanted to mention a few things, so I'll turn that over to Tammy.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a plug for those who might be listening to the meeting today to join us for our community chat tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. There is a registration for that available on our website at jamescitycounty.va/engage2045. We will have that community chat tomorrow to talk about the priorities and actions questionnaire, which is open on our website as well and will be open through February 21st. And then later on this month, starting on January 25th, we'll have our next series of questionnaires open and another 2 community chats associated with our character design guidelines and also our land use questionnaire. So lots of great things happening, but for those who want to participate tomorrow, please go and register at our website. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Anything else? Any questions? Tammy, I had one question. I watched the first community chat, and I was just curious, when people register, do they receive links to any of the materials ahead of time? And this may be a stupid question, but I'm blurring the materials. So many of the materials we see as members of the CPT and the PCWG, I'm not sure what the public gets before the community chat once they register.
Certainly. I'll ask Alex to help me answer this because I haven't followed as closely as he has with the registration process.
Yeah, so the links are not provided during the registration process. However, at the very beginning of the chat, we do provide links to the website and along with the introductory video that people can watch about the phase 3 portion of the engagement, and also have the link to get to the questionnaires on the James City County Engage 2045 website.
Okay, and that's at the start of the chats?
It's sprinkled throughout the chat, but we do put the link in the actual chat box so people can just click on it and it'll bring up on their web browser.
And the reason I asked it was I don't think there was any real participation from the public during that first community chat. And I'm just wondering if it was because they were seeing so many of the materials, like the questionnaires, for example, at the point of the meeting or just right up at the beginning of the meeting, that they didn't have a chance to absorb it and formulate questions. I don't know logistically if there's a workaround on that, but that was sort of my observation. I mean, the chat, for those of you who didn't sit in on the first one, was exceptionally well done. Tammy and Leanne did a great job of moving that along and filling the spaces and asking, making comments as necessary. But I was just wondering whether a lot of the viewing public might have been caught cold as far as not being able to review the materials. And then my second question, while we're talking about this, is can you monitor how many people drop off during the presentation? I think this came up previously in another forum and the answer was no, but I was just wondering what the retention was for those who registered.
Yeah, I can touch on that for a moment. To answer the first part of your question, in the social media posts, we do have both the registration link and the Engage 2045 website listed within that those social media posts for the most part, where the character counts can accommodate it. So we are trying to get people to look at the information ahead of time, or provide people with the direct link to the questionnaires and to the registration page all in one go. Okay. But it just depends on whether people have the time or do take a look at that ahead of time. We did have 3 citizens register for the last chat, and we had 2 people actually show up to the chat, one that asked one question and one that stayed on for a good portion of the beginning of the chat and then dropped off towards the middle. Okay. Yeah, so you are able to see, at least from my point, as kind of the looking at the people who register and who are on the call, when they are on the chat, or when they're participating, or when they're sitting in and listening.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Thank you, Tammy. Any other comments on the chat before I open it up for any other items for discussion? Anybody? All right, well, that's the last item on our agenda other than adjournment. And so may I have a motion to adjourn to the February 3rd Planning Commission meeting at 6 p.m.?
So moved. This is Julie.
Thanks, Julie. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you all very much.